In the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, the Guyana Defense Force stands as the guardians of our borders and protectors of our people. Some carry the scars of battle, others the weight of history. These are their stories, raw, unfiltered, and told in whispers until now.
Good morning, and thanks very much for the invitation to share my experience to members of an organization that is very, very, very dear to me. I am Warrant Officer Class 1 retired Adrian Lloyd George, and I'm going to start before I joined the military. As a young man, I was born and I grew up in the Tiger Bay area, and I was very adventurous. I played football, I played basketball. I was a very good athlete. And I attended the Kingston Methodist School and also the Christchurch Secondary School. At the Christchurch School, I was an outstanding athlete. I think, not boasting, but I think the only person they produced that was better than me was James Rangers. I also represented them with football and basketball. Also, as a young man, I was a very avid reader. And even before I left school, I had completed reading the entire series of Louis D'Amour books. And these are Western books. I was enticed with these cowboys traveling these long distances, sleeping, looking at the stars. So on leaving school, I was looking for an organization that could offer me these challenges. And the Guyana Defense Force was the only organization that offered that. I enlisted in the Guyana Defense Force on the 21st of August, 1976. And after completing recruit course, I was sent to the Military Police Corps. This is at Camp in Ghana. Wasn't to my liking, but I was told that I had to do 2 years before I could have gotten a transfer. So after 2 years, I got a transfer and I was sent to the Jaguar Battalion. The Jaguar Battalion at that time was stationed up the Linden-Soesdijk Highway, and the battalion was commanded then by Major Robert Mitchell. I enjoyed my stay. My battalion at the time was responsible for the sector that covered Lethem, New River, Oranduke, and Good Hope. And I'm glad to say that I did spend time at all of these locations. I think the toughest location for me was Oranduke, because you did some very long overland patrols. And this is mountainous area. So the helicopter would take you from Oranduke to Monkey Mountain, and you had to do the patrol back. I must add that these were hearts and mind patrols, basically to ensure that the people were okay and to build the confidence of the people. At the Jaguar Battalion, I realized after a short while that promotion was a problem, because I was a slim person, and the company I was in, B Company Jaguar, the NCOs all had false names. Big Ling, Big Smoke, Big D. So, and I'm not joking here, this is men 250 odd pounds, of solid muscle. So I really wanted to go somewhere where I could use my brain, because I didn't really have the brawn. But anyway, at the Jaguar Battalion, I am fortunate that I did an exchange program in 1979 with the Black Watch Regiment from England. So they came to Guyana and we went to England to do training in England. In 1980, I was transferred to Training Corps. And I must say that I really enjoyed being in Training Corps. As an instructor, I instructed at the basic recruit level, at the trained soldiers level, the section commanders level, the platoon sergeant level, the platoon commander level, and also at the officer cadet school. As I rose through the rank, I later became the sergeant major of the cadet school. I commenced my recruit course on the 21st of August, 1976. We left Ayangano by bus, and we went to Rusignol. And then from Rusignol, we went to Tecamo with a pontoon. Now, this was a challenge because the ration that you got, the pack ration that you got, consisted of mainly a tin of grapefruit juice and 2 packs of biscuit. And the journey normally takes like about 12 hours, but we went with a pontoon, so it took far longer. And by midway in this journey, by the time you drank the grapefruit juice and then the biscuit, you were extremely hungry and extremely thirsty. And the only water available was the river water. So right away, you had to make up your mind whether I will drink it or whether I will stay thirsty. So you had to take the same grapefruit juice tin and dip the water from the river to drink. Looking at that, I said, this is going to be tough. So when we reached the Tecamo waterfront, if you know a lot of the rivers in the interior, they're actually lower than the bank. So if you reach, you have to come down to get to the river. Now the bank at Tecamo was extremely steep. So when we got there and the pontoon tied up, and I looked, I saw this nice truck. So I said, well, yes, at least we can get transportation to take us where we're going. All you heard was, okay, all staff, put their kit, and on board the truck. Recruits, you follow the trail. You can't last. And it's like, here am I, a pack on my back, a duffel bag full with things in one hand, and my civilian bag in the other hand. And it's like, this is trouble. This is trouble. I ain't looking to help nobody because I'm under pressure. So eventually I reached Tecamo. There was one guy that was recruited with me that we went to school together. So I put down my kit and I went back to help him because he was struggling, So I went back to help him. The actual training at Tecamo, I think, was enjoyable. The physical part of it. I must say that, I was taught how to drill and I was taught how to shoot. I was very interested in the shooting, and maybe that's why later on I became such a good shot. I was really interested in the shooting, and I worked hard at it because I'm not a natural shot. So I had to work hard at it. On completion of the recruit course, like I mentioned earlier, I was sent to become a military police. Now imagine me coming from Tiger Bay. I'm going to be a military police. This ain't working at all. This ain't working at all. So eventually I was transferred from them and I went to the infantry. Promotion for me, came in sports. And why I say came in sports? Because I trained in 1976, and I did not become a Lance Corporal until 1980, which is 3+ years after I finished training. You know, Lance Corporal, Corporal, Sergeant, all those came between 1982 and 1985. And in 1984, I must say, as a corporal, I did the section commander's course. And while I was on the course, they had something called a champion senior NCO. A champion NCO, not a senior, a champion NCO competition. So I took part in the competition and I won. And one of the incentives then was that whoever won this competition would be promoted to a sergeant. And that's how I became a sergeant in 1985. In 1992, I did an exchange program in Barbados. This is a senior leaders course program. And this program was conducted by the Canadians, a very good program. And in 1997, I did the program in the United States of America, and this is the United States Majors Academy. These were all management and leadership courses. Over the years, in training corps and also the infantry, I must say that I did a lot of exercises, jungle exercises, conventional exercises. I did one operation way down in the Maikoni Creek, where it was alleged that a farmer was accumulating arms. And you know, if you're aware of GDF operations, you start from since the day before, you know, and it's orders, briefing, testing a weapon. And by the time you're ready to be launched into battle, you're extremely tired, you know. And we were going into battle here like 2 in the morning. But lo and behold, when we did get to the location, we found out that all the arms that the farmer had, he had license for them, you know. Another exercise I would want to talk about, we did a jungle exercise in the Mazaruni area. And this was an enlightening experience, because maybe this is the first time that the GDF attempted to do an exercise in that kind of terrain. And I can tell you that the signalers, for example, had severe problems in terms of carrying the radio. So it was a challenge of how to deal with the radio and your pack with your kit and ration. You know, eventually what they had to do was put the radio in the pack with the ration and clothing, and then move through the jungle like that. And then there's one experience here I'd like to share, in that after patrolling for the entire day, we decided to harbor. And in harboring, we decided to build off-the-ground shelters. So the guy that was sleeping in the shelter with me, he had some size. And when we did construct the shelter, you know, shortly after, the thing collapsed. And I'm like, what is going on? You know, the other guy said, what's the problem? And I looked, you know, one of the fork sticks broke. So they said, oh, we have spare, man, you can have a spare. So we set up the stuff, and then we laid on the basher, as we call it, and then the next thing you know, the entire thing collapsed. And the guy with me is like, no, this can't be normal. I am not sleeping here anymore. So he upped himself and he navigated out to the roadway. I was so tired that I said, look, I am not going anywhere. I'm going to lie on the ground on this water. But then when we awoke next morning, only to discover that where we slept the night was in the people's burial ground, you know. So that was an experience by itself. Outside of doing soldiering, I must say that, I was a good sportsman, and I did represent the Guyana Defense Force in football, in basketball, and also volleyball. I was also a good rifle shot, and I would have won the individual title for the M70 rifle and also the M59 rifle. In terms of my appointment, I was and I'm going to name the senior ones. I was the Sergeant Major for the Officer Cadet School. I was the Sergeant Major during the 1992 elections for the 241 Company. I was the RSM Training Corps. I was also the RSM 1 Infantry Battalion. And then later on I became the Force Sergeant Major. As the Force Sergeant Major, I think one of the major problems I encountered was the trust among the senior non-commissioned officers. And I had to work very hard on trying to get them to trust each other. So a lot of programs were instituted. These are guest speaker nights, presentations. We even had fun. We had a dance. We had things like bingo. We had the match day line, so that they could interact with each other and build that kind of trust. And I think one of the major achievements was to get the trust amongst the senior NCOs. In my career, I would say one of the greatest achievements was to achieve the rank of the Force Sergeant Major. Seeing where I came from, because like I said earlier in the program, I was born and I grew up in the Tiger Bay area. There are some things I would like to see happening in the GDF. But before I go to that, I would want to conclude my tenure as the Force Sergeant Major. So after doing 2 years, I then proceeded to the University of Guyana to do a diploma in public management. And this is actually the first kind of program that I did since leaving school. So this was a new experience going to the university. But I found it very easy, which is surprising. And I spent most of the time at the university mentoring young teenagers who had just left school. And they were finding the transition from secondary school to university extremely difficult. So I spent a lot of time tutoring them. I was fortunate enough to win the Prime Minister's Medal. And on graduation, I ended up retiring from the Guyana Defense Force after 26 years plus service. But that was the end of my experience in the military organization, because I retired in May, the 3rd of May, 2003, and by the 1st of August, 2003, I was working as a training officer. I was working as a training officer at the Guyana Defense Force Cooperative Credit Union. That was a challenge by itself. So when I took up this appointment, for some strange reason, out of a staff of 34, we had 28 females and 6 males. I don't know if you guys have ever had the challenge of dealing with so many females at one time, but it was a challenge, and I used my military experience. At first, I was public enemy number 1. Everybody hated me. But eventually, they came around, And we did introduce some interesting programs that were lacking. Fit programs, for example, of having an understudy. So if someone has an appointment, someone is understudying them so that whenever they go and leave or they go leave the job, you have someone who can readily, fit in the slot. I worked there for 14 years, and then I decided I'm not going to work anymore. So I resigned from the job. But lo and behold, in 2000, the Ghana Defense Force called me and said, they need someone to run an administrative course. This is a course for staff sergeants. Now, I accepted the job, and I found it very challenging because, to my surprise, they had no syllabus, they had no program or anything in place. So this is like we're starting from scratch. You have to make a syllabus, you have to do the program. I did that for 3 years, from 2000 to 2003. I think it's an extremely good program. And seeing that I saw this organization for so long, everything that I had, I left with them so that this program can continue running. In 2003, they decided I was too old. Not 2003, in 2023. They decided that I was too old, maybe they needed room for a younger person. In terms of my personal life, I met my wife to be in 1982. And shortly after I got my first child, which was a daughter. It was very challenging being a father because at that time I was working at Tacoma. And this is like, you only got 7 days off within a 3 months period. So I'm working, my wife is working, we have our daughter. And then my daughter started to go to nursery school. So once they came out, and as a proud father, I said, well, I'm going to collect my daughter from school. And I turned up at the school, and I got the shock of my life because my daughter didn't recognize me. My daughter didn't recognize me. And instead of me collecting a smiling child, I'm collecting a child and giving people the impression that I'm kidnapping a child. Now, this was a sobering experience, right? This was a sobering experience for me. And I realized right away that I have to have more time with my family. So I asked for a transfer from Tacoma, and the only place I could have gotten a transfer to was the cadet school. But at least this granted me more time to be home because I could be home almost 3 weekends a month. Whereas at Tacoma, I used to be home only once in 3 months. And the 7 days that you got, actually 2 days were taken up in traveling. 1 day to come and 1 day to go. So you really got 5 days with your family in 3 months. This is something I would want to advise soldiers, senior NCOs, even officers. I found it tough to balance family life and the military life. Because the military is also a family and they demand quite a lot from you. So you've got to work at it, or else you wouldn't have a family. You wouldn't have a family. So before you get a family, I would want to suggest that you go to the infantry, spend all your time in the interior, because when you get a family, you need to have more time to spend with them. Fortunately for me, my wife and I have been married. This year here, we'll make 37 years since we've been married. We've been living together for 42 years. I am a fortunate guy because there are a lot of guys who, the family didn't last. I would also want to touch on what I would call building confidence. It is very important that as a soldier, you get a lot of exposure, you get a lot of training, and I'm talking exposure not in the dark, but exposure where people can see you. Because I have found that there is a lot of problem in confidence, basic things like standing and speaking. You're afraid, you're scared to stand and speak, and training, I think, that I received greatly assisted me, in doing those things. And I would want to say that, these are the kind of training that the troops need to have now so they can build their confidence so that when they get out into the eyes of the public, we operate as a professional body and not like people who don't know what we're about. In closing, I would want to talk about the Ghana Defense Force going forward in the future. This is the age of technology. And I would want to encourage all the young people to ensure that they get familiar with technology. Don't just be comfortable on your phone and on Facebook and whatever it is. The Ghana Defense Force offers quite a lot of schooling for people now. And you need to look around and see what is happening, not only in the organization, but in society as a whole, and ensure that you get yourself properly qualified. Once you do that, I can see you having a wonderful future, not only in Guyana, not only in the Ghana Defense Force, but also a wonderful future in serving your country and serving the nation as a whole. And I must add, because I know that a lot of young people now think about fast and quick money, but I am from the old school, and I always believe that one dirty is built down, So you need to manage your finances, and you need to plan properly. And I can see you having a wonderful future, and I can also see the Ghana Defense Force and the nation as a whole having a wonderful future with you guys, excelling in the new technologies and so that are available. I would also want to say that, if I had to do it all again, I would do it. I would do another 45 years. Look at me. I can still run 6 miles.